Welcome, I'm Bryn Brown, and today we are going to do a brief overview of your human design chart. Again, this is something foundational for you to have so that you know what you're looking at when you look at your human design chart, and that if someone, myself or somebody else, references certain terms or certain aspects of a chart, that you can go in and know what you're looking at, or at least know what they're referencing. So we are going to actually look at my chart today. I'm going to use that as a reference, and I'm going to share my screen here so that you can take a look at the same thing that I'm looking at, and we'll dive in. So, okay, so first things first, this is a human design chart. Now I have this on mybodygraph.com, and that's the one I recommend, especially if you're brand new to human design. And the reason is, if you can see my mouse moving here, that this is interactive. So when you click on different parts of the chart, you're going to get information. Okay, so it'll tell you. So if I click on the head here, this head center here, it's going to give you some themes, some not self themes, which I'll define for you in a moment, and questions, so that you have a little bit of an overview. So let's start from the top and imagine that you've just pulled up your human design chart. Okay, so here you have your chart. The first thing that you're going to want to confirm is that your birth data is correct. Okay, is your birth data correct? Now, what you're going to notice is there's a birth data UTC, time zone difference, if any, and then a design date. Okay, so I'll touch on that in just a moment, but make sure that we're looking at birth data and that your birth information is correct first and foremost. And that's going to change things pretty substantially. So if we alter that information, it will change the look of your chart. So I want to make sure that that is correct first and foremost. Anytime I do a reading, or anytime you have a reading with someone, you want to make sure that the chart that you're looking at is accurate. Now, if you're having a professional reading, there's a good chance that they're using different software. Genetic Matrix is one of them. That is a really big one that is commonly used by professionals. So it may not look like this this layout, or be sort of shown in this kind of way, but the information should be the same. Okay. But again, this is a great starter beginner platform to use, because there are descriptions and you can go in. It's a little bit interactive, so you can learn from it, especially if you don't have any intention or plans to go pro, so to speak, as a human design chart reader, which you may or may not. Okay, so you want to make sure your birth data is okay. And then I'm just going to walk you through some of these key aspects in your chart and just give you an overall view of what you're looking at. Okay, so first and foremost, when we pull up our chart and we know that the birth information is correct, we're going to see this sort of chakra tree of life looking chart here. Okay, so this is a body graph. So with the body graph, you're going to see these 9 different shapes. Now, in traditional chakra system, there are 7 chakras. Human design believes that humans have evolved over time to be 9-centered beings. So we look at 9 different centers versus the traditional 7. Now, human design is largely rooted in astrology, and it uses both Eastern and Western astrology. So you're actually going to see those 2 dates up here, your birth date and then your design date. So your design date is roughly 3 months before you were born, so 88 degrees astrologically speaking, and that gives you a different set of calculations. And when you combine the 2 together, they overlay them in this body graph to create your chart. So here's what we're looking at. So we have this center, all the centers, the 9-centered being, and then they're all connected through these little tubes or pathways that are called channels. Okay, so you have centers. So there's 9 centers, and they're different shapes, and some will be colored in and some will be white. All right, we'll talk about that in just a moment. So all these 9 centers all have different energy that they either emit or take in, but there's a theme to each of these centers. Okay, now inside each center there are numbers, and these numbers are called gates. Now, if there's a little circle around the number and it's darkened in, that is a defined gate. And if it is not circled in or darkened in, then that is an undefined gate. So similar to the centers, if it is colored in, it is considered a defined center. And if it is not colored in, it is considered undefined. All right. So you have your centers, and then each number inside the center is called a gate, and the gates connect through a channel. So you'll see some channels are white, meaning that they're undefined, and some are colored in, maybe they're black or red or black and red. Okay. And so when they're colored in, they're defined. Now, whether the colors for the centers are not necessarily as relevant. However, the colors do have a meaning for the channels. So if something is colored in black, it is defined on your personality side. And I'm going to speak to that in just a moment. If it's red, it is defined in your unconscious or profile side. Okay, so that does have an influence. And again, we'll talk about that in just a moment. So when we're using two dates, you have effectively two astrological charts. So if you've ever had an astrology natal chart reading, for example, that's the moment of your birth. So there are two different times that we're using. So again, the moment of your birth, and then roughly 88 degrees before you were born, which is about 3 months. So we use these 2 points. And in a human design, the black on this chart, the black personality side, this is the moment that you were born. This correlates to more conscious personality traits that you would carry, and you would be more likely to see them in yourself because they are more conscious and available to you. So you see these personality traits in your chart via definition, or perhaps they're undefined. And again, we'll talk about what that means in a moment, but those traits are going to be called out here. They are defined in your chart in black. Now, conversely, the profile, the design date is what is in red. Okay, so your design date, 88 degrees before you were born, is this other point in time that human design calculates. And this is in red, and that's where the planets were positioned 88 degrees before you were born. Okay, and that is more unconscious traits. So these are going to be traits, personality traits that you carry that perhaps you are less consciously aware of, but other people might see them in you. So you might hear, oh gosh, you know, I really see you as a role model, for example, and you might think, oh gosh, I'm not really a role model. I don't see myself as a role model, but it might be on your design side, your unconscious side, rather than your personality side or your conscious side. That makes sense. Okay. We're not going to go too much into the arrows here. The arrows correlate to what are considered variables. So that can have influence, or that does have influence in your personality in a different way, but I'm not going to go into that because that's more of an advanced sort of part of your chart. And I want to really give you the foundational pieces. Okay. So you're looking at your chart, you are seeing some colors, you're seeing some lines, some things are connected, some things are not connected. My chart is pretty open. So you might be looking at something that's lit up like a Christmas tree. You can have all of these centers defined, or you can have none of the centers defined. So everybody's going to have a different chart. Okay. Then we have all the planets over here, and these numbers in with each planet. So we'll look at this one at the very top, which is this circle that looks a little bit like a target. That's your sun. So your sun is going to have a number in there, and that's going to correlate to a gate. So this conscious sun for this chart, my chart, is gate 1. So we'll see gate 1 is activated over here with the black line. You could also go over to the unconscious side and see this unconscious sun is activated with gate 4. And we would see gate 4 here with that red activation, the red line. Okay. And now it's not connecting because I don't have a full channel there. But you'll see that that's called a hanging gate. Okay. So what we're looking at is overall, how much definition do we have and how much openness do we have? Why is that important? Well, that actually influences how energy moves through your aura. So this is really what you're looking at here is a blueprint of your aura or your energetic field. So your aura is all around you, as you probably know or have heard, and it is this field that we carry. And this is your blueprint to understand how energy moves. Where a center, when you have a center defined or colored in, okay, so any of these that are colored in, that is considered defined. And what happens is you actually move energy out from that center. It emanates out from your being from that center. So you're emitting energy, and whatever that center, whatever the theme for that center is, you're emitting that out into the world. Okay. And that's consistent. It's something that you also have consistent access to, because that energy is just consistently emitting out into your auric field and beyond, right? Other people are going to pick up on that, and you also have consistent access to that. Conversely, if you have an open center, so it's white, it's not colored in. If you have an open center, you are receiving in that center. So that center, you're receiving information, you're receiving influence and energy at all times. So if you're around, so for example, this head is open here and you're around someone who has this defined, you're going to be receiving their thoughts and their ideas and their creativity and their inspiration all the time, whether you're aware of it or not. And conversely, they're going to be offering and emitting their thoughts and their ideas and their creativity at all times, whether they're aware of it or not. So imagine just being in a grocery store, for example, and walking past people with this open head center, which is actually more common than not. So if you have that head open, you're walking through the grocery store, receiving and absorbing all of this sort of conceptual, abstract ideas and inspiration, and maybe some creativity or thoughts from other people. So it's not better or worse to be defined or undefined. Okay. So it just is. And when we start to understand how our energy works and what the theme of each of these centers are, then you can begin to work with that in a way that works really well for you. So we talk about human design as being a science of differentiation. And this is really sort of at the foundation of it, is where your definition is and where you are undefined. Okay, so similar to the centers being defined or undefined, you'll see that the gates can be defined or undefined. So it's when you have a defined gate, even if the whole center itself is undefined, but you have definition in that gate, you will have more access, more consistent access to what that gate represents than if it were undefined. Now, I do want to make a note here to point out that you have access to everything. Okay, so so oftentimes, because the throat center, for example, is a center for manifestation. Now, oftentimes people will see, oh, I have an undefined throat. So they believe, oh, I don't have consistent access to manifesting, so I can't manifest. And that's not true. You have access to your whole chart at all times. When you have defined centers or gates, or even a channel, it just means that you have more consistent, reliable access to it, and you're more familiar with that energy. It doesn't mean that if it's not defined, you can't tap into that. That's not true at all. You actually can tap into that energy. It just maybe shows up in a less consistent way, or you have a little bit more control over some variability in the way that you want it to show up in that moment. So there are advantages and I don't want to even say disadvantages of each, because it really isn't, again, it's not right or wrong or good or bad or better and best or whatever. It really just is how your energy shows up, and whatever your chart looks like is absolutely perfect for you. And that's the beauty of this. Okay. So, so don't be so concerned about, oh gosh, I have this defined or I don't have this defined. It just is your chart. Okay. So most of the time when we're looking at a very foundational level, we're going to be looking at this information in the chart properties section. So obviously you're going to have your type. That's the first thing we become familiar with. What is your type? So there are 5 types. So this might say manifestor, generator, manifesting generator, projector, or reflector. Then it's going to give you your strategy. So human design, one of the huge values of human design is learning how our energy works so that we can make decisions appropriate for our energetic alignment. So when we're talking about business, because I often talk about business, but even personal life, decisions aren't meant to be made with our mind, right? There's too much that can go into there in terms of ego and and receiving other information, and it can get convoluted, and we can get on a hamster wheel, and we could try to think our way through things. The thing about human design is it reminds us that our energetic field has all the wisdom that we need. So if we can tap into the way the energy is moving or perhaps not moving, we can get a clear answer from our subtle body about which direction we need to go or to not go. That's the beauty of this system. So when I talk about energetic alignment in your business, for example, oh my gosh, like this is such a shortcut because we can get right in, look at the blueprint for your energetic alignment, for your energy, the way that energy flows, and figure out, okay, what do we need to know? Where do we need to tap into our subtle body specifically to understand what is a yes and what is a no for us, so that we can begin to make decisions from that place. When you make decisions from that place, we're making decisions in energetic alignment, and then everything starts to come together. So that's the real value of this system. So as a projector, for example, you may start to learn your basic type, the way that your aura works. So regardless of type, understanding how your aura works as a whole is really, really valuable. Definitely check out the previous videos and my YouTube channel videos for that library to just go into each of the types. So there's a separate video on that. I can link that up if you need that. So you're going to want to understand how your aura works in a really high level. So for manifestors, it's a closed and repelling aura. Again, by design, it's not a bad thing, but it helps keep you buffered from people so that they don't interrupt your nonverbal creative flow, right? Like you have this inner flow, and if people kind of bump into you and get into your space, it can really interrupt you and derail things. And that can be a real challenge. And so you don't want that. So we have a little bit more of a closed and repelling aura. Generators and manifesting generators, you have an open and enveloping aura because your strategy is to respond, right? To respond to life. You need to be open to life. So you're more open and receiving and enveloping in your aura. Projectors, we carry a sort of a cone-shaped or penetrating aura that sort of zeroes in on another energy field and sort of like enters in a cone shape. And the reason for that is because we are designed to wait for the invitation. So once we're invited in, we come in deeply, right? And we have the ability to see what needs to be seen so that we can convey the message that needs to be conveyed. Okay, so the cone shape actually helps us to sort of get into the heart of things really easily so that we can sort of express what our purpose is. And we need to wait for the invitation because it can feel very off-putting if you are entering without permission. And then a reflector has a sampling aura. So reflectors are really beautiful. They're like walking mirrors, right? So your aura is sampling. You're sort of picking and choosing from your environment what you really want to take in. So, and because you're lunar beings, it's like we take in all of these things and we sit with it, and then we see how we feel after 28, 29, 30 days, okay, a lunar cycle. So that's what your type is going to tell you is the shape of your aura, or how your aura operates. I guess not the shape, but how your aura operates and functions in an overall perspective. Then we'll look at the strategy. So the strategy is really where it comes in for decision-making time, right? So what's the strategy here? So if you're a manifestor, your strategy is to inform. If you're a generator or if you're a generator, your strategy is to respond. If you're a manifesting generator, your strategy is to respond, then inform. If you are a projector, it's to wait for the invitation. And if you are a reflector, it is to wait a lunar cycle, okay? Now, each type has a not self theme. So this chart's going to tell you your not self theme that is related to your type. Okay. So when you are out of alignment, this is your signal. Your not self theme is your signal to tell you you're not in alignment, my dear, right? Like this is the way the universe is communicating, and your energy is communicating, and the quantum field is communicating. So for manifestors, that is a flash of anger. So anger is what comes up because we get disrupted often. And when you're out of alignment, you're not in flow with the universe. You're literally here to convey this like divine inspiration into reality, right? And when that gets interrupted or you're out of alignment, out of touch with this nonverbal divine, inspiration, that can be angering. For generators, you're going to feel that as frustration. You're here to build something and to master something over time. And when you don't feel like you're mastering or growing at the rate that you think you should, then that is when the frustration comes in. For projectors, it's bitterness, a deep sense of bitterness, because projectors are not here to just wait for the invitation, but they also, you also need to be recognized. So recognized for your value and then invited. When that doesn't happen, bitterness is the not self theme, a deep sense of bitterness. For reflectors, disappointment. Okay, you see the potential in everybody and everything around you, and when that potential isn't lived up to, it can be tremendously disappointing. All right, so that's your not self theme. Conversely, you'll have a signature. Okay, so I'm just going down the line here on the chart properties. So your signature is sort of the flip of your not self theme. So when you are in alignment, what do you experience? Okay, so you're going to feel as a manifestor a deep sense of peace. As a generator and a manifesting generator, a deep sense of satisfaction. For projectors, it's success. And for reflectors, it's surprise, right? Oh my gosh, you lived up to my expectation. What a surprise. What a pleasant surprise. So those are your signature themes. That's what we're moving toward. All right. Now, definition, we're not going to get too much into that, but that has to do with the circuitry and how the energy flows within. Okay. And so this is going to say single, split, doubles, single split, triple split, or quad split. Okay. So that just refers to how many separate areas of definition do you have? So you can see I have single definition. I have these two defined here and they're connected. So let's say I had also had these two defined, that would split me. So I would have these connected and these connected, but not connected to each other. And so if they were connected to each other, it would be single because they would all connect in one long flow. But if it were split, I would be connected separately. So I'm not going to get too much into that. Again, that's going to be more relevant in a chart reading session than what we're going to go into today. Your authority. Okay. So when we talk human design, the big 80% of it is type, strategy, authority. Type, strategy, authority. So when we're making decision, we're moving down that line, right? Type, strategy, authority. So type projector, in this case, in my case, my strategy is to wait for recognition and an invitation. Okay. And then my authority. How do I know if something is truly correct for me or not? So I'm going to lean on my authority. Now, the most common authorities you're going to see are sacral. That's only for generators and manifesting generators. If you have this square center second up from the bottom, if you have that defined, so that'll be colored in red. That makes you a sacral being. Okay. If you have that, you might be sacral definition. Okay. That's your gut instinct. If you have another very common, I think it's around 50% of the population, I could be wrong, has an emotional authority. You can even have this sacral center defined and still have an emotional authority, but those are the two most common authorities that you're going to see. Okay, so I'll do another video. We'll have another class on the different types of authority and how we make decision-making processes through those. And certainly that's something that I work with my clients on specifically, and getting in touch with how to actually use your authority and make decisions from that place. Sacral, emotional, you may have an ego. So that's for manifestors and projectors. You could have a splenic authority. So your spleen center here. You may see something that says no inner authority, sounding board. I'm missing a couple. So forgive me if I don't mention yours. Mental authority, that might say that as well. So those are very different kinds of ways that you're going to move through your authority. So sacral is going to be a gut instinct. Spleen is going to be an intuition, knowing. Emotional is going to be that you need to feel all the feels and ride the waves of your emotions before you land on the shore and know what you feel. And then ego and self-projected and mental right? Sounding board, no inner authority, those types, it's going to be more about talking it out. Okay. And they're all a little bit different. I won't get into those now, but that's the authority. So as we're making decisions, it's okay, type, here's my type, you know, that determines my strategy. So what's my strategy? Have I followed my strategy? Am I a generator that's trying to initiate something? Am I a manifesting generator trying to initiate something without responding first, right? We want to make sure we're in alignment there. Then we go to our authority. Is this correct for me? Okay. And then you're going to lean in and say you're an emotional authority. You're going to sleep on it. You're going to ride the wave of emotion. And then we're going to decide. Okay. Then you'll know where you land. Or maybe you're sacral or splenic and you just know in the moment what is correct for you or not. Then the mind tries to talk you out of it. We can go back to our authority and say, you know, my gut instinct said XYZ, so I'm going to do XYZ. Okay. So we're going to start to wrap up here with the final two pieces that I want to share with you. So one is the profile. This is a big one that we look at. So we oftentimes in human design, you'll hear people say, I'm a 5-1 projector. For example, in my case, I'm a 5-1 mental projector. They may throw in their authority, right? Or sounding board projector. So you could be a 4-6 emotional generator. Okay. Excuse me. So you'll see that oftentimes people present that way. Your profile influences how you interact with the world. So when we're looking at our strategy, or excuse me, our profile, that's how our aura operates. When we're looking at our strategy and our authority, that has to do with decision making. Our profile is how we're actually interacting with the world. Okay, so there's 6 different numbers that could go here. So you could have a combination of these 6 numbers. The first one is relative to your conscious birth time. So this conscious personality. The second number is going to always be your unconscious, your design number. Okay, so that has to do with your sun and your earth. Again, not going to get too much into that, but just wanted to share that with you. So you may see these terms here. So heretic investigator in this case, it might be, you might be a hermit opportunist, right? That's a 2-4. So depending on what your numbers are, that will influence how you show up in the world. And each line influences in a different way. Okay, so your, gosh, if I could just go by memory really quick, your 1 line is the investigator. So that's someone who really wants to understand and research, especially from a foundational place. Your 2 line is your hermit. That's someone who really needs to go within to be rejuvenated. The 3 line is the martyr. That's someone who is a trial and error type who really thrives by experiencing things. So it's an experiential learner for sure. And also someone who has the possibility of becoming that true martyr, of putting others before themselves, okay, for good or bad. The 4 line is your opportunist. Okay, so the opportunist is all about being in the right place at the right time with the right people. So the network is hugely important for an opportunist. The 5 line is the heretic. This is more of a teacher or guide type of an energy. And the 6 line is the role model. So this is actually an interesting line to have. There's 3 phases of a 6 line profile. So depending on your age, it's going to determine which phase you are going to be in. So that first phase is up to your Saturn return, which is around age 28 to 30. And that's going to be very much like a 3 line, that experiential learner, trial and error energy. The second phase between Saturn return, so 28 to 30-ish, to age 50, your Chiron return, that's going to be more of an observer mode or a phase that you'll be in, still very experiential, but really observing, what have I learned from this? What are other people experiencing? What can I learn from that? And then after age 50 or your Chiron return, then you move into more of a role model. That role model energy is there always, okay, but you really embody that after age 50. Don't have to wait to be 50 years old to lean into that, but it certainly is when that energy comes out in full force. And then finally, your incarnation cross. I encourage everyone to go in, just copy your incarnation cross, paste it in Google, and Google it, you'll get a short paragraph. Your incarnation cross has to do with your earth and your sun and your earth. And it is a one paragraph, beautifully, surprisingly accurate summary of the way that your energy really shows up in this world and it's like life purpose, but I don't mean that in that this is the work that you should be doing, because not everybody's life purpose is meant to be their job, or their job isn't meant to be their life purpose. So that's not true for everyone. Now, for most of you that are here, that feels very true and accurate, because our life purpose is our work and vice versa. But you'll see how incredibly accurate it is. So there are a lot of different incarnation crosses that you can have. So there's no way I could possibly cover them all in one short overview. So definitely look that up for yourself and see what it has to say. So that's the main overview. When you have a chart reading, for example, they're going to go into a lot more detail about the different gates. Okay, there's 64 gates, 32 channels. So again, no way I could cover that in this short overview video, but all of those gates and those channels carry a specific energy. So then we can start to look at those gates, look at your definition, look where you're open, and start to see how does energy move through. And then what's activated with which planet or planetary astrological aspect. So your sun and your sun is going to be how we sort of present ourselves, whereas your earth is going to be what grounds us. Your moon is what drives you. I like to look at Venus and Jupiter for business, because that's what brings in money and blessings, right? So what gates are activated? What should we be leaning on? So there's huge advantages to either going down the rabbit hole and researching this on your own, which is how I started, or having a chart reading. If you want to have a chart reading with me, or with me, I'll drop a link in the comments so you can have access to book that. That's a 75-minute recorded chart reading session. Super fun, and it's super specific to you and what you're working on. Not always just business focused, but life focused as well. You could also go out and, research somebody else that aligns with you, or maybe you already have somebody that you look to for your human design knowledge, and that would be great too. Getting a reading can be really, really powerful and effective. I'm just going to stop the share here really quick as we wrap this up. But if you, for the meantime, if you are interested at all in learning a little bit more about how to use this for your business, tomorrow I'm running a webinar on human design for business, and really how to understand what you're looking at and how each of the different types move through business a little bit differently. There's tremendous validation and freedom that comes from understanding your chart and your energy type. So I really encourage you, if you're at all interested, to at least sign up, catch the replay if you can't make it live. We'll be live tomorrow so tomorrow is Wednesday, March 16th at 3 p.m. Mountain, which is 5 p.m. Eastern time. So I'll be going live. It's a 75-minute class. It's totally free. So I'd love for you to join. I'll drop the registration link here for you to join if you haven't already registered. But we'll go in a little bit further detail than we did here today. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this gives you at least a quick glance overview at your chart and how you can sort of begin to interpret it for yourself, especially if you're brand new to human design, and begin to think about the way that your energy moves and feel into your authority and see how that shows up on a day-to-day, particularly when we're making bigger decisions about the way that we want to run our business, the strategies that we want to implement, why something's working or why perhaps something is not working. All right. I hope that was really helpful. I can't wait to continue the conversation. Hopefully I'll see you at the webinar or catch you on the replay. Let me know your thoughts on this and any ahas that you had in the comments below, and we'll see you again next week. Have a great day. Bye for now.